Before we start the episode, I just want to bring your attention to a crowdfunding campaign that we're doing here at Popular Front. If you go to www.popularfront.co/10k, so that's 10k, we're trying to raise 10 grand because Popular Front is moving very fast, and we feel like to capitalize on the momentum we've created, we really need a little bit of money on the side just to buy new equipment, pay a few volunteers, and go to different places. So yeah, www.popularfront.co/10k. If you're in the position to put your hands in the pocket and support us, please do think about it. This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the very niche and kind of geeky details of modern warfare with me, Jake Hanrahan. Today we're speaking to Raki Ap. He's an activist of the Free West Papua campaign, and he's going to be talking to us about what is basically an uprising going on right now by the West Papua people against the Indonesian government in their areas. It's a conflict you hear very little about, and right now the Indonesian government has turned the internet off, and there's very little information able to get out of West Papua. We know at least 10 people have been killed, and the people are continuing the protest. So Raki's going to give us an idea about the history of the conflict and why you should be paying attention to it right now. If you like what we're doing and you want the bonus episodes, please do consider supporting us on the Patreon at patreon.com/popularfront. Before we talk about what is essentially an uprising right now, maybe you can tell us what is West Papua. You know, like a lot of people unfortunately don't even know where this place is, have never heard of it, and it's a very long running kind of conflict.
Okay, cool. So for the people who don't know where West Papua is located, it is just right above Australia, and it's like the western half of the island of New Guinea, and the name we call it is West Papua. And before it was illegally, from one point of view, became part of Indonesia, it was a Dutch colony, so known as the Netherlands New Guinea. In the early 60s, the Dutch were actually preparing the West Papuans towards independence. So it is absolutely from importance that people understand the root causes of the uprising we see today in West Papua. And it starts actually at, the unfinished decolonization of West Papua as clearly part of the Pacific Island nations. So in 1961, when West Papua was part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands prepared West Papua towards independence. They gave the West Papuans the Morning Star flag, as we can see they're waving it on every city during every protest. The Morning Star flag was given by the Kingdom of the Netherlands on the royal decision, all in the preparation of an own state, West Papua. After that, they installed the first government known as the New Guinea Council. And besides that, they also installed the Papuan Voluntary Corps, which was actually a kind of military force trained by the Dutch military. And it all was installed and ready to take over their own country in 1961. Suddenly, and this is the interesting bit which people should know of and why it's probably been hidden until now, is because the United States get involved, and even the United Nations facilitated this illegal transfer from the Netherlands to Indonesia, because in 1962, August 15, 1962, in the headquarters of the United Nations in New York, the Netherlands and Indonesia signed an agreement known as the New York Agreement. Mm-hmm. Without the involvement of any indigenous West Papuan, they decided about their future. So with the signing of that agreement, it had an article which said that the West Papuans should had the opportunity to vote via a referendum. We know today as the Act of Free Choice, which was held in 1969. And this is the most important part of the history. The so-called Act of Free Choice, which was held in August 1969, was a big farce. It was, I think, the biggest international fraud happened under the eyes of the United Nations. And that makes it probably, the most sensitive issue of this time, because of the collaboration of the Netherlands, of Indonesia, of the United States, and the United Nations itself. Because instead of a one man, one vote principle, how the referendum should took place, Indonesia selected 1,026 men, threatened themselves and their families to vote for integration into Indonesia. That was the referendum. So you don't have to be a lawyer nor a scientist to understand this referendum was a act against international law, against human rights, whatever. So since then, we became part of the Indonesia we know today, and the world was there letting it happen. So since that moment, West Papua became part of Indonesia, the violence started, the occupation started, and the killing started against indigenous West Papuans. So what we see today is the sentiment of 75 years of colonialism, of racism, and of extraction of our resources. Because what the interesting thing about the referendum, before the referendum took place in 1967, world's largest gold mine located in the heart of West Papua had signed an agreement between that corporation, a US corporation, and the Indonesian government. So that makes very what's the right word?
It was very corrupt as far as I see that.
Exactly. I think that's the best word you can get. It was, everything was like a red. It shouldn't took place, but it happened probably because of the economic interest. And the world's biggest gold mine is also the third largest copper mine located in West Papua. And beside that, we have gas fields and all kind of other resources. So we are like the richest province of Indonesia, living as poorest citizens of Indonesia, handled as second-class citizens in our own country, knowing we are one of the richest country in the world. And that is the sentiment we see today.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Maybe you can tell us about the violence, because I've been reading into this and researching this for a few years, and it seems like the Indonesian military specifically has been incredibly violent to the indigenous people there.
Yeah, so since they invaded West Papua in 1963 with a military force, they never leave. So since they invaded us, the killing started. The reason I fled to the Netherlands was after Indonesian special forces killed my father, Arnold Ap. He was an anthropologist and a musician, very familiar musician until now. And because he made music about the aspiration and of the West Papuan people to live free in their own country, to express their songs, their culture. Indonesia didn't allow it, so they deny people to express their own culture in their own land, and all they did was oppression and killing indigenous people when they want to do it. And the last report of Amnesty International, published in July 2018, the title of that report was like, "Don't bother, just let him die." So, and it says everything about, Indonesian presence in West Papua, which is only interested in our resources. But since Indonesia, occupy a country, NGOs are estimating more than 500,000 killings, and that is 1/3 of our population. So imagine that until now, Indonesia banned all foreign media to report in West Papua. So there's no journalist allowed to enter West Papua, because they don't want to know the world know what is happening there. And that's the problem, which is underlining everything in West Papua, that the world still doesn't know where West Papua is located. A lot of people in the world, and not knowing what is happening there, so they can do whatever they want, and they're doing it and get away with it, with killing with impunity. That's what the report of Amnesty says.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly tried a few years back to look into it, like trying to get there, because generally with my work, I often go to, conflict zones that people are not generally going to or try to. And everybody I spoke to was like, no, it's just not possible. It seemed they've got it all locked down there.
Yeah. So of course, we got our own ways to get into West Papua. So we got some journalists also from the Netherlands, via Papua New Guinea. We could smuggle them in, because our freedom fighters and our activists, we know the way, we know the jungles in West Papua, crossing the border to Papua New Guinea. So So if we want, we can get people, and that's the way we get our stories here in the Netherlands, for example, or in the UK. But if you go via Jakarta using the ordinary way, it's gonna be very, very difficult. And when foreigners are entering West Papua, and they're not black skinned or they're not Indonesian lookalikes, then immediately security forces, intelligence forces will follow them.
Yeah, they're a target.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you got camera equipment with you, you're gonna, it's gonna be for sure that you're gonna be targeted by the security forces to monitor you everywhere. Because in West Papua, you got everywhere checkpoints of military security personnel. But they're hiring citizens to monitor foreigners. They get paid when they bring information to these checkpoints or military stations. So they got eyes everywhere. Even priests and human rights group lawyers got monitored every day in West Papua. So even in front of their homes, they got so-called market guys, but if they're actually, as eyes and ears for the Indonesian intelligence forces. So it's gonna be very tough, if you want to do reports over there.
Right, so it's like even if people manage to get there, they're still being watched all the time. Like people can't really speak freely.
Exactly. If you don't got the right contact, you really can't manage it to, get out of the eyes of the security personnel. So you have to know some locals, who guide you, who know the safe places and the persons you should get to. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult, to find your way and to get to the right persons. It's going to be a risk, because if you go to the wrong person, you will get caught by these security forces. So it's that's the biggest risk. Journalists don't go there because it could to prison, and we've seen it a couple of years ago. They got caught and they get almost treason. Get brought to court for treason. So
Jesus.
it's really tough.
You mentioned the freedom fighters there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the resistance movement, because that's something I'm very interested in. I know there's very little resources for them, but they're still trying to fight back.
So yeah, these Indonesia usually call them rebels or separatists, but if you know the history after that, you must understand this. These rebels are actually a follow-up of the first installed Papuan voluntary corps under the Netherlands. So since Indonesia took over, these rebels, pick up the guns and they want to protect the country. That's what happened. So, and since the colonization continues, these rebel strongholds stays alive. It is their country. They live in these jungles. It is their house. It is their home. So these are actually freedom fighters who were there, living there for centuries in the home, and they were actually, preparing themselves in the early 60s towards independence, but didn't succeed because Indonesia colonized them. And since then, they're there, and so they're still holding this desire towards freedom, which is now visible among all West Papuans. And that is the sentiment we see. These strongholds, rebel strongholds, always were there, but it was just a minority, living in the deep jungle, in the edges of the cities. But the sentiment, the desire for freedom, is among almost every single indigenous West Papuan, and that is what we see today in West Papua. The desire for freedom never disappeared. It is still there, and now it come out. Now it come out because this racist incident is not an incident, but it is a systematic problem of colonization, of discrimination, of marginalization in our own country.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Recently in the news, for the very first time in a very long time anyway, I saw West Papua come up, but there's headlines, and I thought, oh, okay, what's going on? So there's been some kind of clashes, right, with the students, and then that turned into what I would call a small uprising. I mean, considering how locked down the area is. What's happening?
So it all started with this attack and ratio comments against West Papuan students who were studying in Surabaya on the island of Java. And they were at the dormitory, and suddenly bystanders joined by police and military, shouting at them because they founded a Indonesian flag in a what is it, in a water reservoir over there near to the school.
Hmm.
So nobody sees it, but the racist comments already started, and it was supported by the security forces, and it was all filmed, and it went viral.
So wait, sorry. So the way this started was because the Indonesian forces found an Indonesian flag basically in the river or whatever, and then for some reason they then turned on the students.
Exactly, and even
Doesn't
until
even make
now,
sense.
it doesn't make sense, and even there is no evidence that the students did that. They just saw an Indonesian flag close to this student complex, and they say it was them, and then the racist comments and the attack started. So it was based on nothing, but it is something common. If something happens, the West Papuans got appointed as as criminals, as whatever they call it. So this is not an incident, this is a systematic problem. But now this video got viral, and there wasn't an evidence until now, and the reaction of Indonesia was sending an anti-terrorist team entering this student dormitory. This is the insane behavior of colonial Indonesia. There isn't even a evidence kind, and for such a thing, sending a anti-terror unit to get the students arrested
And they don't
is
even have
like,
guns.
these are students, man. Come on, you will send a police officer, or even a military was even to, but a anti-terrorist unit to get the students is like, this is like intimidation by a state, state apparatus, whatever. But this is like, West Papuans are, actually used, and that's this, this mad thing. We are used to this kind of attitude and violence by this Indonesian state. It is like a normal thing in West Papua against West Papuans. So when this video gets viral, and then it's like all this sentiment of 57 years of oppression, discrimination, marginalization come out, and that is what we see today in West Papua. And if you saw the other video footages of the students, because they were filming too, you could hear them saying, they say always say, "Bapak, father, this is not the way you should communicate to us. What is this? Did you got your instruction?" So they were talking very correctly. And you saw these, bystanders and this Indonesian security force saying, "Monkey dogs, go back to your country." And this is like the problem which sparks these entire protests all across West Papua. And it was, we were already expecting this will happen at a certain point, but this come to a surprise that it happened now, and we are very glad with it, because
So it was
from
like the
our,
spark.
it was like the spark of what we see today. Yeah, because this is not an incident. We already know the behavior of Indonesia, but this was like the spark that that activated all the sentiments of every West Papuan who lived there for 57 years under this racist regime in Indonesia. So yeah, and I think this sentiment will never disappear. Even when this protest will lay down, this sentiment will never disappear. So I'm very curious how this will work out.
So what actually happened then after the students were, kind of brutalized by the police and what have you, and the anti-terror unit went in, there was protests, right? And I saw that one of the judicial buildings, I think it was, got burnt down. Tell us about that. What happened?
Yes, so after this footages get viral in West Papua and other parts of Indonesia, so these like peaceful resistance movements all across West Papua, like the KMPB, but also the freedom movement, our activists on the ground, immediately reacted and start to mobilize the people, to say, all right, monkeys, let's rise up and show that we don't, if they call us monkeys, then get out of our country. So it was like the starting point of all these activists and other students, but also church leaders and governors in West Papua starting to mobilize and rise up and say enough is enough. And that is where these big protests started. And of course, you got always some of these people who use violence, who lose bad behavior to express themselves, and that is where these buildings probably started to, get burned. But, I'm not laying awake from that because, but it is very clear that it is a very logic sentiment which we see. This is, 57 years of brutal occupation,
Exactly.
500,000 killed. What about who cares about that building? Who cares
Exactly.
about it?
Exactly.
It's about human lives who have been killed, our land destroyed, our values who have been destroyed. Who cares about that one building of the colonial Indonesian government? So let me say that way. But besides that, who said that it was West Papuans who burned that building? It is Indonesia who is closing, journalists from entering, doing their job. It is Indonesia who's stopping this internet connection. So probably they got something to hide, and they are very familiar to set up their own, scenarios to put West Papuans in a bad, daylight. So perhaps it is them, torching these buildings and making news so the world sees, look, Papuans are burning this government building. We don't know. So from our point of view, let the world come to West Papua and do the report. So because it's probably Indonesia who are hiding something. But yeah, it's sad that this burden goes up. But I'm not. That's not my biggest worry. My biggest worry is that militia groups are active in West Papua and they are facilitated by Indonesian military. That is more worrying. That's what the world should know. The world should know about this illegal occupation, about this 500,000 killings. Who cares about this one building, government building, what's on fire?
So are the protests spreading? Are they still active? The last time I saw, they looked to be getting quite lively, but I've not seen anything else for a few days, at least a week.
Yeah. That's fair too. And we've seen that the internet is still cut off. But I've seen footages of today in different areas in West Papua. So the movement is still there. Protests are still going on, but we don't see any footages because of this internet connection, which Indonesia have cut off. But for as far as I know and the information I got, this protest will still continues to go and the mobilization is still going on. So, yeah, I'm expecting more protest the coming days. And yeah, from here in the Netherlands, we're following it on the foot and make sure we will do our part in the Netherlands, informing media centers, politicians, and making our own protest here as well.
Sure. And what kind of reaction has the Indonesian military had towards these latest protests?
So we have seen reports of at least 10 people now killed by Indonesian military forces, including children and women. So that's very sad. But the most worrying part from our side is that Indonesia usually use nationalist, is fundamental Muslim militias, to intimidate and attack peaceful protests, which happened. And ABC Australia reported about that, and also the UN. I'm very glad that the UN Human Rights Commissioner took that also in a note and a statement last September 4th. So, but it is, and we know what Indonesia did in East Timor. I don't know if you're familiar with that case.
Yeah, it's a genocide, right?
Exactly. They killed, 1/3 of the population, knowing that the entire Security Council was on the watch. So this is a very a worrying situation that we see the same militia groups joined by Indonesian military forces, walking in the streets of West Papua.
So they're basically jihadist groups, you're saying, like jihadist militias going after West Papuans.
Absolutely. Organized and facilitated by Indonesian military, which they did in East Timor, and now they're also in West Papua. So that's the most worrying part about what is happening in West Papua. So, and they are attacking peaceful activists, and we even see military shooting at from the other side of the river to peaceful activists. So this is, and because they're banning the entire media, they're shutting down the internet. The information can't get out as much as we hope to. So that's the big problem. So they can do whatever they want, and they already did it for the last 57 years. But in this kind of situation, cutting off all the information is like it's like a blackout, and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, well, generally any dictatorship or authoritarian leader that cuts out the internet, why? Because they want to do bad stuff and they don't want anyone to find it. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and we are aware of that, and we hope the international pressure must rise on Indonesia and the Indonesian government. And luckily, the first good step is that, a lot of Pacific Island nations are, calling on the UN to act, calling on the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner to visit West Papua. But yeah, it's the Indonesian government who's still, doing their own thing. So, we need more pressure to make sure that they will, reopen the internet, and letting foreign journalists doing their job in West Papua, and otherwise, they can still continue all these crimes against indigenous West Papuans.
Would you say this is an uprising?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I'm 35 years now. I've, joined this Free West Papua campaign, this freedom struggle since, I was 16 years old, and I have never seen such a thing like this. So I'm encouraged, and I hope I don't see this, the sentiment disappearing again. So even when it will come down, it will not disappear, and it will come back again. But I think this is huge, and I think, from this information I got, we will forward this momentum, make sure that the world will no longer ignore what is happening there, and demanding our right of freedom, which was hijacked with this illegal referendum and this illegal integration to Indonesia. So what you see at the protest is a lot of, text like referendum, freedom. So this aspiration will be, the demand, and it won't disappear. And I think this is the momentum that the entire nation will forward, this vision and this desire towards freedom. So yes, it is an uprising, and from my point of view, we are heading towards another momentum, and another momentum and another momentum until we got our freedom. That is my expectation from this uprising.
Sure. And what role do the resistance groups play in this kind of situation, if any? I know that some of them are armed. They've got what they've got. Where do they come into all this?
So, we, from the leadership now, so the United Liberation Movement for West Papua, it's like an umbrella diplomatic, wing, their statement, and we have always campaigning peacefully. So that is our point of view now. So these rebels are there, but they are not, provoking the Indonesian government, because we know our case is very strong. Unless Indonesia is entering their strongholds, there will be a gunfight. Our campaign and our freedom struggle is always focused on a peaceful way. So, we just want the world to know what is happening there. That is where our campaign is focused on, just telling the truth. When how West Papua became part of Indonesia, they know international law is on our side. So our campaign and our freedom struggle is peacefully, unless Indonesia is, committing military operation in areas, in villages, then there will be a shootout between these freedom fighters. So, and it is, international law, it is self-defense. We have the right of self-defense.
Of course, self-defense is a must for anybody.
And they will always to try a spin out, making stigmatize the freedom fighters, these rebels. But we have all the right to protect our people. We have all the right to protect our land, and we have all the right to fight for an independent nation, West Papua, which was the agenda on the first place when the Netherlands was there. So the only thing illegal in West Papua is Indonesia and the military forces. So we will continue, this peaceful campaign, informing the people in the world, the governments, that the right of self-determination belongs to the people of West Papua. And we are very confident now, because the world can see now the desire of this entire nation and all the people, that they want freedom. So that is what we are focusing on, and I'm very confident, that this momentum will be stronger and even bigger. And this is huge. This is gonna be huge, because West Papua is like world's second largest island, housing the world's second largest rainforest. So the reason I became a climate activist as well is because I gonna want to inform this, environmental organizations, all these governments who are caring about, this climate change. They can no longer ignore what is happening with West Papua, because, saving these indigenous peoples, the IPCC and the UN already mentioned it, is like, saving indigenous communities, we're saving forest, and we're saving protecting this planet by making sure that there won't be a lot of carbon. So therefore, this is a much bigger issue than West Papua alone, and that is what we are trying to educate in the first place the Pacific Island people, who are now getting more and more aware, who are really vocal about their cause. But it is a issue the world must realize is important for the entire planet, and that is this is the cause which keeps me all day busy, educating students, educating academics, activists here in the Netherlands and in London as well, joining Extinction Rebellion. This is going to be a big case, and when the world is knowing what is happening in West Papua, we are a very rich country. We are occupied. They can no longer ignore it. So it's about people. When people know it, we got a very, very strong story.
Yeah, man. Well, good luck to you and your people. Raki, if anybody wants to get hold of you and follow your activism and your work, how can they do that?
Well, they can visit our website, www.freewestpapua.org, and they got our information and the links to myself as well. And feel free to contact us to ask information and how you can join. Everything is welcome. Yeah, every help.
And you guys are on Twitter as well, right?
Yes, we got a Twitter account, Free West Papua Twitter. We got our Instagram and Facebook account. So yeah, follow our social media accounts, share our posts, and get involved, man.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate that.
Wow, Jake, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it very much as well.
That was Raki Ap talking about the current uprising in West Papua. Be sure to follow his campaign on Twitter. It's at Free West Papua, which is spelled P-A-P-A-U. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, please do consider supporting us on the Popular Front 10K campaign. We're trying to raise 10 grand because basically all our equipment is fucked and we're moving very rapidly and we're not really able to keep up with the stuff we've got. So we're trying to raise 10 grand. It's not that much, but it's something. We've got just over halfway now and we've got I think 20 days left. So if you go to popularfront.co/10k10k, you can support us there. Alternatively, you can subscribe to the Patreon, where you get bonus episodes, access to the Discord, which to be honest has become this incredible kind of Popular Front hive mind of people sharing all different research and information. For me, it's vital, to be honest, now with my work. But if you go to patreon.com/popularfront. Also, we've got a lot more stuff on the shop. There's more merch. We're selling the private suite advert as an A3 poster now, a big vaporwave design, very intricate. People seem to like it. Go to popularfront.bigcartel.com. We've also got a lot of t-shirts there. The Slava t-shirt right now is the best seller. Everybody seems to want that. So yeah, go there, popularfront.bigcartel.com. This episode was sponsored by thedefensepost.com, defense with an S. Check them out for regular reporting on the world in conflict. Also, just want to say a big thank you to the people that have been supporting Popular Front through Bitcoin. The Bitcoin community has been very generous and seems to believe in our kind of ethos of no corporatism, no authoritarianism, and certainly no elitism. If you want to continue supporting us with the Bitcoin, go to popularfront.co/support and you will see our Bitcoin wallet there. And just this isn't a fad. I've been involved in Bitcoin since I was 22. So yeah, you can even check my work. I was at the first Bitcoin conference with Amir Taki and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you very much to the community there. Be sure to follow our documentaries. Go to youtube.com/popularfront. You have to subscribe and hit the bell because YouTube is doing everything it can to censor our content because they said it's violent content that we're putting out. We're putting out journalism, hard news, dispatches, all of that, and they don't seem to realize, the algorithm decides now, the fucking algorithm. So basically they see violence. There was a video of a fascist getting kicked in the face when we put up our Ukraine anarchist video, and after that they've really started censoring us. So it's hard to find stuff on the Popular Front YouTube. A lot of people said to me, we didn't even know you do docs, and we just got back from Syria filming a documentary, So it's a bit of a pain, but yeah, youtube.com/popularfront. Please do share it around. we're getting there, like subscribers there are getting up, but again, it's not turning up really in search results. The videos don't get recommended. Again, YouTube bullshit, they don't care. We've spoken to the Team YouTube people, and when I point out that, hey, like there are big companies like Vice and BBC and Sky News who put out much more violent content than us, which of course they would because it's news and it's fair, they don't get censored. And I've mentioned that 5 times in 5 different conversations now with Team YouTube. All of these conversations they've been replying to until I mention that, and then they just go completely quiet, they ignore it. So, you know, YouTube isn't a platform for like grassroots stuff, or it's not a platform to promote your own independent stuff anymore, unfortunately, unless you've kind of, I don't know, unless you're doing fucking cat videos or something. But yeah, it's still Popular Front, we're on there, so youtube.com/Popular Front. Please do subscribe, please do share the videos, we do need that support from everybody. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram. We got a lot going on there. We nearly got banned because we were getting mass reported. I have mentioned this before, but it's looking like things are doing okay now. I spoke to someone at Instagram, and even though the algorithms do ultimately decide your fate there, yeah, we're still up anyway. So instagram.com/popular.front. We've got loads of stuff there. And we also use the Instagram to promote other people, to promote other stuff that we like. And I've said this from day one, Popular Front does not share things it doesn't like. So we don't see something and go, oh yeah, give us money and we'll share it. No, everything we share and promote is something we genuinely think is good, because I don't think a lot of people do that. They'll just share whatever the fuck, you know, like you see all these YouTube videos, unfortunately, have to like pretend to want to sell razors or pretend that they like some bullshit mobile game, because, you know, again, YouTube has stopped them monetizing their channel, which again they've done to us before we even applied for monetization. I should stop moaning about YouTube now, but yeah, we will never share anything we don't genuinely think is good and worth sharing, you know, because as I said, this is completely grassroots, 100% independent, and mostly we are funded by the subscriptions on the Patreon. So thank you very much to the following high tier Patreons. Without you, none of this would be happening. Those people are Anthony Kabarak, Russia Alakidi, Adam Berg Snyder, Axel Iverson, Brian McLaughlin, Callum Ross, Chad Walker, Christina Rivetti, Christopher Martin, Dan Dunham, Daniel Shearer, David Gilmore, Diana Gorvanek, Emiliano, Emily Molly, Fletcher Tate, Jack Mayhoff, James from the Discord, Joanne Stocker, Joel Tambusi, Josh. Do let me know if you want your full name on there, mate. It's just Josh on the Patreon. Juan Hernandez, Kay Hardy Roberts, Kyle N. Payne, Lawrence Abrahams, LH, Laika Madik, Margaret Bowling, Moody Al Rashid, Nate Van Dor, Noah, Ari from the Discord, Patrick Bronte, Peter McCormack from What Bitcoin Did, very cool podcast, Cuball, Ryan Sandercock, Scartoon Music, Sebastian from the Discord, Surushe Hawazi, Stephen Davila, Teddy, Tom Lochrin, Tony Bin, Vida Provost, Zachary Hinch. Thank you very much. We've got a ton of top tier Patreons there, man. Like, thank you so much. Without you lot, honestly, this would all collapse quite quickly. So yeah, thanks very much. The Patreon's doing well. It's getting to the point where I can probably start just doing Popular Front full time within probably the next 6 months, I reckon. You know, I think that could be a possibility if things continue growing the way they're growing, which is just like an incredible thing. It means a lot more Popular Front. I mean, at the minute, you know, I'm a freelance journalist and I do work obviously on the side, and Popular Front is my kind of, you know, project, my passion project, I guess. But it's getting to the point where this is the whole business now, and that's very cool. So thank you very much. Again, if you do want to support us, patreon.com/popularfront, or go to the 10k campaign, popularfront.co/10k. I know you're getting sick of me mentioning that, but we've only got 20 days left, and I'm sure there's got to be rich people out there that can help us out, you know, so definitely do consider supporting it. Music in this episode, the intro was by Home and the outro was by Sam Black, also known as Son of Old. Go to his SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/son-of-old.